So welcome to Trump 2.0, the promise and the reality. All right, so we're going to first principles. So when I was in engineering school, we had a physics professor back in IIT, back in India, who said, look, I'm not impressed with equations and math and formulae. I'm going to ask you real fundamental questions, and you need to answer with basic fundamental principles. You can't hide behind equations and say, oh, because the second derivative goes to zero, because blah, 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 the matrix disappears. That's not going to work for me. And so the language back then was that the fundamentals, the fundas, have to be clear. So any guy who really knew his stuff was a funda clear guy. But the thing is, you had to distill everything, bring everything down to the basic fundamentals. Okay, so that's where we are going to be today. Because you're all moving at different speeds. Some of you are in class now, last night. Some of you 20 years ago. And by the way, on the Zoom screen here, make sure you put your first name and last name, because I see a Sunil, I know 7 Sunils. I see Alan, I know 9 Allens. So help me out here. Put in your last names next time too, please. Okay, so we're going to the basic fundamentals here to make sure we capture everyone and get everyone on board. There will also be equations, of course, and diagrams, because this is going to be at many levels, the fundamental level, then the deep click level in our language. And I'm going to essentially try and leave the politics at the door, if that's even possible, and try and give you both sides as far as possible. I'm going to try at least to be neutral. So we're going to try and focus on the politics. We have a team of 2 leading us, Presidents Trump and Musk. So we're going to combine their policies into one, essentially. Okay, so Trump 2.0. Let's get into this, and stop me anytime you have questions, folks. Just yell them out or put them in the text. There are 3 pillars to Trump 2.0. All right, so 3 policy pillars. So stay with me here. The first one is essentially tax cuts. Now look, Trump is trying to be Ronald Reagan. That's a tough act to follow, as we will see. Ronald Reagan brought hope to America, and he brought some sort of a happy outcome after the years of stagflation and growth. He was a whimsical, goofy kind of guy. So it's going to be a tough act to follow. Anyway, he's trying to be Trump. He's trying to be Reagan, so tax cuts. That's the first pillar. Supply side economics. He's going to follow the Reagan supply side economics model. And I promise I'll tell you what supply side economics is all about. You have to go back to Reagan to understand what Trump is trying to do. So we look at Reaganomics, but you can't just start with Reaganomics. I'll take you one step back, and I'll take you to what preceded Reaganomics, the Keynesian model, the Great Depression. So this is going to be a macro tour de force. We'll start from the Great Depression through this Keynesian model, what that was about, how it apparently broke down in the 1980s when Reagan happened. And then we're going to move up from it we'll actually go through the Carter stagflation, through Reagan, through COVID, and to Trump 2.0, believe it or not. Okay, so one big leg of the Trump-Musk policies is Reaganomics 2.0. And very simply, the top headline, Reaganomics is tax cuts, deregulation, and that is supposed to essentially foster innovation, according to the supply side model. We are going to deep click on that, because when we did Reaganomics back in class many years ago, there were many nuances to Reaganomics that we didn't really capture. Then when the whole world became Keynesian, we essentially just did Reaganomics as an afterthought from 9/11 till a few years ago. It was just done in the last couple of days of class. So I'm going to give you deeper insights into Reaganomics, okay? So tax cuts, deregulation, essentially, and not messing around with large government spending, cuts in government spending. Those are the 3 big pillars, ostensibly, of Reaganomics. So that's one pillar. The second pillar of Trump 2.0 are tariffs. Now, already you will notice that's already flying in the face of Reaganomics because that was laissez-faire. Don't get involved. Let the markets work. Tariffs is the exact opposite. All right. So, nevertheless, tariffs. That's the second big pillar. And we'll talk about McKinley. Oh my God. McKinley, my God. It's like suddenly this guy who no one had heard of is now back. There was a mountain named after him, and then it was unnamed by Obama. And now this guy is the hero of all the Trump supporters. It's like, is this actually happening? So we talk about the second pillar, tariffs, and this infatuation with McKinley, President McKinley. And the third pillar, running the country like a business. And I have to be very careful here. So you will hear this. And first of all, even in tariffs, I promise you I'll discuss, well, he's not really going to put tariffs. He's just bluffing. It's not going to happen. People talk to me as if they have some insight into the man's mind. And I'm going, just wait 24 hours. I'm not going to even comment on the tariffs. It's going to change tomorrow. Another country is going to be taken over by us. So the third one is run America like a business. And, apparently all these sound good. Why not? Yeah, like an efficient business. What's wrong with that? Even the tariffs, apparently, it sounds like a good plan. Hey, they're selling stuff super cheap. Let's make it in America. And even Reaganomics sounds great. Frankly, there's so much of Reaganomics I like. Lower taxes, hey, I could use that. Deregulation, my God, I could use that. In fact, when the famous Rosa Oppenheim, who many of you had in class, offered me this job as director, the only thing I asked for was deregulation. I said, I need to choose who teaches in the program. This is how we got superstars like Louis Kerman sitting there, flying in, a Yale lawyer flying in from California, #1 now in the global program, Peter Parks, Barry Carafin, Nacho flying in from Madrid. And so that was the best thing I negotiated for. Of course, deregulation. Who wouldn't want deregulation? So outwardly, all these things sound great. And I'm going to take you in there. Okay. Any questions so far about where we are heading? Richard. Wow. Thank you, Richard, for summarizing. Excellent. We're capturing all this. All right. So let's go to the beginning. Let's go to the Great Depression and 1930s. This is when macro history begins. And I'm just going to, no diagrams. So the Great Depression, 1930s, there's a collapse in confidence. And by the way, if you need to email me, here's my email address. There's a video by Bob Dylan when he keeps holding up these things. And I feel like that. So there you go. That's me. All right. Because it's faster to do this than share the screen and share back out. So the Great Depression, nobody is spending any money. We are dead in the water. 1930s. The economy has contracted by 30%, 30. It's the end. Everyone is the communists in Soviet Union are going, oh my God, see that? They should be centrally planned like us. The capitalism doesn't work. It was all over, it looked like. 1 in 4 individuals were unemployed. And there was nobody borrowing, there was nobody lending. The money was stuffed in mattresses or in stacks of newspaper in the corner or buried in mason jars in the backyard. And consumer confidence was gone. Back in the day, it was called animal spirits. And this annoying economist from Cambridge called Keynes came up with this new theory called Keynesian economics that said, hey, the problem is that consumers all over the planet are essentially sitting on their money, what little there is. The banks had failed, so people had pulled their money out of banks. 30% of the banks had failed. And essentially, it's stuffed in mattresses. Animal spirits, he called them animal spirits back then, Today, we call it consumer confidence and investor confidence. What do we call consumer confidence in our language in class, folks?
C-bar.
Yes, thank you. C-bar. So C-bar and I-bar are consumer confidence and investor confidence. For those of you who are seeing this for the first time, so essentially confidence was low and nothing was happening. So this Keynes shows up and he writes to George Bernard Shaw and he says, I have a macro model that will basically change the way we do macro policy. And Keynes said the government needs to get involved. We can't just sit there and do nothing. Now, this comment was met by consternation. First of all, Keynes at that time had attitude, as you know in class from my stories. He was condescending and rude. Reporters left his office in tears often. And so it was tough to take him seriously. So Keynes said that money that's sitting in mattresses needs to be pumped in the economy. So it's the government's job to borrow that money and build roads, build bridges, Tennessee Valley Project, Civilian Conservation Corps, pump it in the economy. And this was met by huge consternation. Does anyone remember why? This was a shock at that point in time in the 1930s. And it was met with huge consternation because at that point in time, there was no role for the government to do anything like that. It was called laissez-faire, leave alone. It's not the government's job to create jobs or to jumpstart the growth. Laissez-faire, man, just let everything work on its own. And so here comes this annoying, eccentric Englishman from Cambridge University who says, no, that model is gone. It's the government's job to borrow the money sitting in mattresses and build the Hoover Dam, the Tennessee Valley Project, Civilian Conservation Corps, our highways later on in the Eisenhower administration, and on and on and on. And so it was a shock. But wow, you mean we get involved? And so that's how Keynesian economics was born. But why would mom and pop America lend to Uncle Sam, especially when so many banks had failed and there was so much disaster in the country? And they actually did not lend to Uncle Sam, they lent to FDR. And so my wife's mom is gone now, but that whole generation would say, he sat in front of a fire, the fireside chats, the famous ones, and basically he promised us that he would pay us back. We were lending to him. They actually would get, that whole generation would get emotional. They said FDR was the guy. They didn't equate him with the government. They trusted him. So Uncle Sam, FDR, borrows the money, injects it into the economy. And Keynesian economics is born. And it was revolutionary because prior to that, again, there was no role for government. Now government is actively involved in jumpstarting growth, creating jobs, soft landing that's going too fast. So here's a question for you. Uncle Sam borrows $1,000 from Oscar and gives the $1,000 to Mitch Bresnik, who is going to basically build another terminal in Newark Airport. How is this going to help? You've taken $1,000 from Oscar's mattress, that's minus 1,000, and stuck it back into Mitch Bresnik's pocket, that's plus 1,000, and he's going to extend Terminal C. It's going to cancel out. So how does this work?
Multiplier effect.
Wow. Yes, and so it's the multiplier effect. Very controversial. This is basically the DNA of the Keynesian model, the multiplier effect. So very simply, borrow $1,000 from Oscar, give it to Mitch to build Terminal C and another expansion there. Mitch's construction workers spend some of that. They take their families to the shore. And people at the shore now get that money, and then they spend some of that, and spend some of that, and spend some of that. And so it all adds up to 175. Instead of spending $1,000, it's gone up by $1,750. So that's called the multiplier effect. It ripples through the economy. It changes hands. You spend it, somebody else spends it, somebody else spends it. And now you get a multiplier. The economy grows by more than you put in. So you put $1,000, finally the economy grows sometimes 2.5 times. So here we are. This is working great now. We are moving up in time. Are you with me? So far, so good, everyone? So multiplier effect, increasing government spending. And over time, though, there are problems with the Keynesian model. Keep in mind, the early government spending was all infrastructure. We're getting into the good government spending and the quote unquote, the bad government spending, which is the big issue today with Trump supporters and everything. So back then it was all quote unquote good government spending, infrastructure, roads, highways, dams. Over time, its nature changed. It became interest payments on bonds. It became entitlements, unemployment, welfare, Medicare, Medicaid. And those today are seen by a certain group of people to be bad government spending, not as productive, needs to entitlements. And so a large portion of government spending today is entitlements. The discretionary portion is very low, defense and so on. So I'm going to take you to all this stuff about cutting government spending. It's not going to happen unless he touches and cuts entitlements. It's not going to happen. And he's promised he won't touch entitlements, but then promises mean what nowadays, So the nature of government spending changed. The multiplier also changed.
I have a question. One of the guests is asking, can you please tell us who started the bad government spending?
Over time, it happens, more and more interest payments, more and more unemployment benefits, especially from the stagflation era. Then you add more during the COVID era, and you have more and more entitlements. And it just builds up over time. So basically, the early plan was that we shouldn't have any budget deficits. So Keynes said, when you're in a recession, so the business cycle goes like this. When you're in a recession, the government spends your money, borrows from you and builds roads, highways, and so on, and jumpstarts the economy. So has a deficit of, say, 70 billion. Then when the economy recovers because of this multiplier effect, government is supposed to back out and get out of everyone's hair. And now we should have a budget surplus of 70 billion. That's the original plan. So over the business cycle, you go into a deficit, you jumpstart growth, then you get into a surplus and government backs off, disappears. So over the business cycle, minus 70 plus 70, the budget was supposed to be in balance. Well, over the years, it was not in balance. We borrowed more, and the deficit GDP ratio, 2%, 3%, 4%, kept growing. And what we found is that when it was 5%, the budget deficit GDP ratio, that was thought to be sustainable. And we've done this in class. It means as long as the budget deficit divided by the GDP was under 5%, you could just borrow and borrow and borrow from Lewis to pay Chev, and borrow from Chev to pay Sean Leonard, and borrow from Sean to pay Mike Haas, and borrow from Mike Haas to pay Nina, and just roll and roll and roll and roll and roll. Under 5%, it was great. Over 5%, it was a problem. Over 5%, it meant that the red lights would come on and the deficit would be non-sustainable. And it's a long story why 5%, but there's no deep theoretical reason. It's essentially at the point at which the interest that Uncle Sam loses is less than the size at which the economy is growing. So if the economy is growing more than the interest Uncle Sam is paying, it's sustainable. Okay, so essentially deficits are now a problem. Today it's around 7%, by the way. So if whoever had won, if Kamala had won, I would have said, Kamala, you're gonna have to cut spending. We are at this point, the amber lights flashing. So the cutting government spending, yes, something has to go. Something, maybe the subsidies in electric vehicles, which he's throwing around. Maybe that's part of the CHIPS plan, but something has to go. Wow. So Jennifer Kirby says, when will we raise taxes? Okay, we'll get to that, Jennifer. Taxes also for whom and what kind? We'll talk about that. So deficits are growing. Today, they're a problem, around 7%. They never really balanced out. Store that away, okay? All right, so I'm going to now go to the whiteboard. So this is the backdrop, and I'm going to now bring Reagan into the story. So just to summarize, introduction of Keynes from the Great Depression, the multiplier effect, large government involvement, deficits that should have been balanced over the business cycle never really went away. We thought we had tamed them, but they kind of started growing and kept growing, and now they're 7%. And that's the backdrop. So let's go to our diagram. Microsoft whiteboard, share. Okay, let's make as much room as possible here. Okay, so here's a diagram. And here is output. This is Y, which is output and jobs. This is the aggregate supply. This is the aggregate supply of everything on the planet. Tanks, guns, planes, software. This is the aggregate demand for everything on the planet. Tanks, guns, planes, software, pharmaceuticals. And this is the inflation rate. P0, so this is inflation rate, like prices. These are all percentages on this axis. And this is output. Let's change color here. Let's do blue. And so this was the Keynesian story. Here, you move the aggregate demand out. This is what I was trying to tell you in words. Keynes, this was radical, by the way. He says, get involved. Forget the laissez-faire. We move the curve out. So we go from this point here. This was some Y, low GDP. This is 0.1. We go to this point here. Look at this, higher output. This is that multiplier effect story I told you in words. Y higher and more jobs, but some more inflation, P higher. And this is called jump-starting the economy, moving the curve to the right. And this was done by an increase in G, and later on by a decrease in interest rates. The Fed would increase money supply and decrease interest rates, and a cut in taxes. So increase in G, the three buttons from the Keynesian buttons today, government spending, and back then, repeating myself, it was all good G, everyone. That's the big battle today. Then lowering interest rates, this is the Fed. This is the Fed. Fed does this baby here, and taxes. So these two, that's Congress and President, fiscal policy. These two, that's fiscal, and the middle one here is monetary policy, the Federal Reserve. And this inflation, P0 to P high, this is the good kind of inflation, okay? It's called demand pull inflation. So this inflation is the inflation that is correlated with higher jobs and more growth. This is the good kind of inflation, demand pull inflation. So any questions so far, folks, with this diagram coming back to you? Those of you who's had class with me? Okay.
Sure does, Professor.
Hey, Mark. Mark, which Mark are you?
The current one.
Oh, okay. Well, it should be right on the tip of your mind then.
Yes, it is, Professor.
Thank you. So here we are. So this is so everyone's good. This was Camelot. The 50s, the 60s, macroeconomists were rock stars back then. This was the good times. So if inflation is too high, oh, no problem. Move that baby down. And that was a soft landing. So, macroeconomists would take orders from presidents. Presidents would say, elections are next November, and I would like inflation to be down another 0.75. You think you can do that? You said 0.75? Would you like fries with that? It was amazing. They took orders and they could jumpstart. This is jumpstarting and soft landing. This was Camelot. And then things started to change, the 70s. Poor Jimmy Carter, a good guy, an honest guy, a brilliant guy, nuclear physicist, both was in a submarine, but he was unlucky, and as Napoleon famously said, of course I need good generals, but that's not what I want. I want good generals and lucky generals. Don't just get me good generals. And God bless him, he was unlucky. And so here we go. Let's see what went wrong. So look at this diagram. This positive slope, and let me just get into some little theory here, is extremely important. For this line to be positively sloped, to allow this to happen, you move the curve to the right, get output going up, inflation going up. That line needs to be positively sloped. For this to happen, please note that here the percentage change in inflation has to be greater than the percentage change in wages. That's the DNA. And the guys who figured this out got Nobel Prizes in the 80s and stuff like that. So in this diagram up there, for that to actually happen in the real world, folks, if inflation is 5%, wages have to be under 5%. So if wages go up 3%, and inflation is 5%, you get that diagram up there. If inflation is 5%, listen carefully now, the world is unraveling. Okay? The Keynesian model is going to break apart. This is now 80s, 70s, late 70s. Reagan is hovering. Jimmy Carter has no idea, God bless him. So if inflation now is, say, 10%, and wages are also 10%, or maybe 11% or 12%. And remember, folks, that's the problem with macro. Once you have inflation, it's like a forest fire. Once inflationary expectations get baked in, unions now will demand more wages. They think, oh my God, inflation is going to keep going up. Next wage contract, instead of, if inflation is 9%, let's do 11%. Oh, and then you're doing orders and you're putting forward orders for delivery of copper and paper pulp in the future. Oh man, yeah, supply chains are going to cost more. Let's add some more to the delivery 3 months from now. And so once inflation gets baked in, that baby is hard to remove. It's not, that's coming from engineering. Took me forever to understand that it's not, you turn off the light in macro. In engineering, you turn off the light goes off. You turn on the light comes on. In macro, you turn off the light, it may go off. It may go off after a while. It may go off and then come back on. It's expectations in there. And it was very hard to reconcile to that world coming from engineering. So if you have equal to, if inflation is 10%, and wages are 10%, which this was happening in the 70s, then this story here is gone. And you have a paradigm shift. So let's bring in Reagan. That story is gone. Look at this aggregate supply. Okay, take a look at it. It's positively sloped. Not anymore. What happens then is that baby becomes vertical. Here's aggregate demand. And here is P0, and here is Y low. This is output. This is low output, and jobs. This is inflation. So now it's 1979. let's say 9%. We're dead in the water, and this baby has become vertical. And if you're thinking, oh my God, Langdana, this is deep theoretical stuff. I mean, it was supposed to be practical. Guys, this is the DNA, okay? So now you tell me, if it is vertical, and this comes out of Chicago, by the way, and actually Milton Friedman, Rutgers' greatest product, I have to say that every time, hinted at this in the 60s. In the long run, this baby is going to be vertical, not positively sloped like you had up here in this story here. Okay, so it's going to be vertical. Look at this. What happens then if you try and press the same buttons? You move this baby out like you did. The Fed lowers interest rates. The government increases spending. What happens if it is indeed vertical? Look at that. Nothing happens down here. No change. No change. You're still dead in the water. What's the only thing that happens here, frustratingly? You only get more inflation. Only more inflation. More inflation. Let's say this is now 14%. And so suddenly the Keynesian model and all those Keynesian victories of the past gone. They keep pressing this button, they do more and they do more. And they only get more inflation. 9, 14. You had a mortgage of 15% back then. That would stop conversation at parties. Oh my God, how did you get a mortgage so low? Who's your broker? Okay, so here you are, aggregate demand policies. And those of you who are seeing this for the first time, whenever you move the aggregate demand, it's a Keynesian policy. Okay, so that's a simple rule to remember. Suddenly this model is gone. And now there's this big refrain, Keynes is dead. All you guys in Princeton and MIT and Harvard, go back and go back to the drawing board, because those are hotbeds of Keynesianism. The world is like this. And in a world like this, moving the aggregate demand is no good, according to this model. And so the only way you can increase Y, folks, do you see it? Moving the aggregate demand is no good. And anyway, so what's the only way you can increase Y? Just diagrammatically. Anyone?
Move supply.
Gotta
Yes,
move supply.
Thank you, Lawrence. Good seeing you, Larry. So here we are, move the supply curve to the right, and hence supply-siders were born. Supply-siders. So it's as simple as that. It was a sheer necessity. Stagflation is happening. This is stagflation here, low output, huge unemployment, high inflation, dead in the water. There was malaise. Confidence was low. Poor Jimmy Carter, God bless him. There's a malaise that has gripped our country. So now we are on top of this macro doom and gloom. We have another overlay of doom and gloom. We are being told that there's a malaise. We know there's a malaise, And so dead in the water, C bar down, I bar down, Keynesian model gone. I'm going to clear this page here because it freezes up. We have Reagan and the supply-siders. So let's see what Trump is trying to emulate. So let's change colors to blue. And here we go. So here we go. So how do you move this baby to the right? So a whole bunch of Chicago economists are now center stage, P0, Y low. And how do you do the supply side policy? This was supply side economics. And look at it, the benefit of supply side is you get Y higher, outputs higher, more jobs, and lower inflation too. Lower inflation. And so the textbook examples of how do you move this baby to the right? Let's change colors. Let's do black. was decrease in business taxes. Here we go, folks. So this is the official story, and there's lots of nuance that we didn't capture when we did this in class many years ago, and I'm going to fill that in for you now. So this is the official version. Decrease in business taxes.
So, Professor, one question.
Hannibal.
So, when we were moving the demand side, we had government interest rate and taxes, those levers. How is business taxes a different lever than just taxes?
Yeah, so in the Keynesian model, Hannibal, and by the way, Hannibal, one of our early DBA graduates from our doctorate in business administration program. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So yeah, so in the Keynesian model, it was mostly income taxes in the story. And let me tell you about the corporate taxes. So this was business tax focus. Income taxes go down here too, by the way. So business tax cuts were accelerated depreciation, investment tax credit, things like that. So what was supposed to happen? Now listen carefully. What was supposed to happen is I am a big company. My taxes, my corporate taxes are cut from 38% to 22%. I then hire more MBAs. I then hire more workers because I am hopeful about the future. That little last phrase we didn't emphasize enough. Listen carefully now. Tax cuts by themselves, when there's gloom and doom and drama and more drama and Leonard Musk running amok, is not going to cause C-bar and I-bar to go up. Reagan followed Carter. So Reagan was this guy who increased morale, brought C-bar up. The most terrifying thing about the business is when you hear, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. All kinds of goofy, whimsical quotes. This is a shining city on a hill kind of thing. And it wasn't hard. After Carter, stagflation, and all that, there's a malaise gripping our country. Here's a guy who's the great communicator, an actor, a bona fide actor and a good one. And he understood morale. He brought spirits up. There are many here who will disagree with me, but spirits went up. So there was hope. It's all about hope. Remember, some of you have done international trade with me, and we've seen It's a Wonderful Life. And remember, the first line in that movie, it's all about hope. It's C-bar, that's everything. And so business tax cuts means in an environment of hope and optimism, businesses rush out and hire more workers. Women burst into the work. They were hired by the companies. There was also the second pillar, income tax cuts. And what was supposed to happen is with income tax cuts, households would say, hey, instead of paying 39% tax rate, income tax rate, I'm paying only 28%. Maybe I can join my wife at work now, because now it makes sense for me to schlep out and drag about on the turnpike and hire an au pair or somebody to watch the kids instead of me being Mr. Mom here at home and, homeschooling the kids and all that. So now it makes sense. Now I can come out ahead. 22%, hey, I schlep out to work. So labor supply was supposed to go up. Women broke into the workforce. Now, again, this is controversial. I'll never forget. In class, we had Faith Johnson, at the head at that time of one of the largest nursing companies in New Jersey. And if she's there, if you're there, Faith, say something. And so when I was doing this, women burst in because of the tax cuts. So she pounced on me. She actually flew at me, so to speak, and said, Farrokh, are you kidding me? Tax cuts this Reagan stuff is all nonsense. We were broke. I had 2 daughters to put through college. My husband was working overtime. Women like me simply had to go to work. And forget all your fancy diagrams. It doesn't matter what the tax rate was. I just had to schlep out there. So Faith, I do a shout out to her every time. So there is another view to this. Anyway, so business taxes, companies hire more. Income taxes, we supply more labor. And the third one was deregulation. Deregulation. Airlines can fly anywhere. Trucks have fewer border crossings. Deregulated banking. Deregulated the bandwidth finally. Deregulated telecommunications. So deregulation. More endogenous freedom. So three pillars were supposed to move this curve out to the right. What was, according to the textbook story, no focus on G and no focus on interest rates. So basically the big Keynesian buttons, they made a big deal about, no, we don't mess around with aggregate demand. No G, no interest rates, no Fed. We do this supply side, cut taxes, we deregulate, and what's supposed to happen is there should be an increase in productivity. This is according to them, which would lead to an increase in innovation. And so their thing is we're going to create the perfect ecosystem for innovation to burst forward. So we are basically telling companies, take your money, take your tax breaks. We're going to stop hounding you and riding you with all kinds of regulations. We're going to give you freedom to hire anyone and move capital and do stuff and come up with the next big thing. That's what the model was supposed to be. And they said no G, no interest rates. However, here is the other side. There was G, folks. Who are we kidding? Yes, hang on just a second. There was a massive defense spending increase. So the Keynesians go, what nonsense. There was huge G. There was huge G in defense. So they're being disingenuous when they say supply-siders do not believe in G. And so what I would like to add is, yes, of course G matters, but supply-siders frown on entitlements. It's a political hot potato, but G that will increase productivity, roads, railways, cybersecurity, helping alternate fuel, that kind of productive G, in their words, the good G, quote unquote, yes, they like. What they're talking about, which G they don't like, is the bad G. Yeah, what's the question?
I have one of the, Vikram asked question. Can you please cover the impact of deregulation and government deleveraging?
Yeah. So, Oscar, let's hold off on the questions right now. Guys, so that, deregulation, I can't give you the diagram. Essentially, if airlines can fly anywhere, if banks can charge any interest rate, it is supposed to increase productivity. And if you can move, please mute the microphones, everyone. So that's how that's supposed to work. Okay, here is the big point. G was important. It wasn't an across-the-board cut in spending. G that dealt with infrastructure and productivity was included in here. But the big point here is, folks, for this to happen, the backdrop of optimism had to exist. Let's move to Trump 1.0. Trump 1.0, large tax cuts. No backdrop of optimism. So keep in mind. And when I was in class with you many years ago, folks, I didn't make a big deal because it was there. We hadn't seen the other side. But without the backdrop of optimism and C-bar up, companies will take the tax. What will they do? What do you think if you got a tax, if you're running a company and you got a big tax cut, and suddenly the future is looking weird to you? This is Trump 1.0 now. There are impeachments, and there are insurrections, and there is chaos, and there's turbulence. The country is divided, and there are people with torches marching around in Charlottesville, and one is killed. What happened then with Trump 1.0 was essentially maybe that. It was like a wedding party where the caterer didn't bring the food. The wedding, of course, happened, the tax cuts happened, but the caterer doesn't show up with the food and the alcohol. That's that kind of wedding. So it was basically what happened in Trump 1.0 with the big tax cuts. All you suits out there, and you suits are all out there, what did you do? You said, thank you, Mr. Trump, and you did share buybacks. Billions and billions, hundreds of millions of dollars of share buybacks. Like, the hell with it, I'm not going to hire more people. Not in this climate. There's a trade war brewing and another trade war brewing. And by the way, Biden was worse than Trump when it comes to trade war, Trump 1.0. And so too much chaos. No, I'll take the tax cuts, we'll pocket it, we'll do share buybacks, our earnings per share will go up. Merry Christmas. Here comes the bonus. So to reiterate, you want this baby to move out, Mr. Trump, in Trump 2.0. First of all, decreasing G, and here's the reality which I promised you. Unless you want to touch entitlements, you're going to have a hard time cutting G. Tax cuts. Yes, of course, he'll push through tax cuts. They own both the House and Congress and everything. But tax cuts, in the absence of optimism, is going to be a wedding where the caterer is not showing up, just like Trump 1.0. It's not automatic that you get a supply side stimulus. Very important, folks. Very important. All right, so how was that supposed to affect the budget deficit? Here you go, this is Y0. Come here, and does anyone remember what was the plan? This is Y1, and just as G minus T greater than 0 is a budget deficit. Government spending, this is government spending, larger than tax revenues. This is, so let's say government spending is 10, taxes are 7, and you get a budget deficit of 3. So now you've cut taxes. What was the plan? What was the Reagan plan? And what's the Trump 2.0 plan for the budget deficit? This is P0. Does anyone have any idea?
If you expand the pie, it's a bigger pie with a smaller percentage.
Wow, Hannibal. You must have had an amazing macro professor, I'm thinking.
Yes, I did.
So here we go. So listen carefully now. This is tax revenue. This is called the Laffer curve. And critics of this call it the laughter curve. God bless Laffer. So the Laffer effect. Okay, so this is how it's supposed to work. This T here, that's dollars. This is tax revenues. And this is fundamentally important, folks. So I'm taking you into Trump 2.0. I'm taking you into the first engine warning light that he is probably going to see. And that is going to be deficits ballooning out of proportion. Why? Because he's going to push through the tax cuts. He's going to push through some government spending. He's going to push through some deregulation. And frankly, we do need some deregulation. The Bidenites were over-regulating. But he's going to push through that. The wedding will happen, but the caterer will not show up with the food and the booze. That's what I'm trying to tell you. So listen carefully now. This is tax revenues, dollars. That's equal to tax rate, it's a percentage, times the size of the pie. This is national output or income. So what was supposed to happen in the Reagan model, thanks to Arthur Laffer's Laffer curve effect, is that if you, so let's say this is tax revenues, it's 10%, and Y is 100. Okay, so you would get $10 in tax. That's the dollars. So T is dollars, small t is the tax rate percentage. What was supposed to happen is if you cut tax rates to say 5%, so now you cut tax rates, but what was supposed to happen is, let's say the size of the pie went up. That's here to the right. You know, so we have tax cuts and everyone's hiring more MBAs and women or men are going back into the workforce, so the participation rates going up. What would happen here is 25. Okay. And so tax revenues would actually go up. So the thinking was you can cut tax rates. So if you cut tax rates, if the tax revenues, I mean, if Y went up a whole lot, you will end up with more tax revenues. And that was supposed to kind of calm the deficit down. Actually, according to one version, it would balance the deficit. It never happened. And there was a lot of recrimination flying back and forth. And so this is crucial. So if the economy misfires, if the tax cuts happen, and they will happen, the suits will get the tax cuts, the super rich will get the tax cuts. I just want some, guys. That's all I want. You know? And so if that happens, this is happening, tax rates are going down. If this baby doesn't go up, our tax revenues will fall. So you've seen this now. So in G minus T in the deficit, now the promise is to cut government spending, but this is what the government spending chart looks like. This is time. This is government spending. And here is government spending. And let me change colors. This here is entitlements. You can look this up. So this is all Medicare, Medicaid, unemployment, entitlements, Social Security, which he has promised not to cut. And if he cuts, it's going to be chaos. His base is going to be, what did we do? What? How is this going to help us? So this is entitlements. So this little, tiny little sliver is all that he and Leonard Musk can cut, essentially. So it's not happening, guys, unless he goes into entitlements or he unleashes Elon Musk to do it and then tosses him later on like, oh my God, he was the bad guy. No, he did this on his own, which Trump may do. I don't know. So G is not happening. So essentially what we'll see is this is something to watch. And deficits, by the way, do rise and fall. So the reality is, look for the deficits, look for tax revenues to start shrinking. This one, if he touches entitlements, look for a lot of drama. Questions so far?
But Farrokh, it is the jobs that he's actually cutting, the government jobs.
Hey, Cheryl. So Cheryl's another one of our DBAs. I should say Dr. Clark. So yeah. So what's that doing to confidence, and what's that doing? He is cutting, but you know what? He's cutting Fauci's security detail. That's like 15 million. So when you look at the cuts that are being made, they are so small, they don't even show up. This is a huge country. This is where the action is. And if you're not touching entitlements, in terms of real cuts, it's not going to happen. You know, what he can start off is by throwing the subsidies out to electric vehicles, all the massive Biden subsidies to EVs and alternate fuel and solar cells. I would say Uncle Sam shouldn't be subsidizing those guys with my tax money. Let the smart money decide on what to fund and what not to fund, like it has done in the past. That's a no-brainer. But again, now Leonard Musk or Elon Musk will support the subsidies, you know, especially on his cars and SpaceX and so on. And so, but that's where the cuts should happen. That's a huge amount of money, and taxpayers should not be subsidizing innovation. Let the smart money do it, like it has done in the past. That's where I would start. If you want to cut, start with that. So what's the warning lights? So far, everybody okay with me so far? More or less?
Hey, Professor.
Frank, oh my God.
It's Frank Catalano. How are you?
How are you?
I hope all's well with you on your end. I miss your class tremendously. You're unbelievable. Thank you for this so far. one quick question. I don't want to take up too much time. I just want to understand, the government spending part. I'm going to play devil's advocate here as I normally
as you've
do.
always done in class, Frank. Nothing's changed.
But the purpose of the government spending, Doge, whatever you want to call it, they want to get the spending levels back to pre-COVID, which is 2019. So if you look at the spending charts over the last 30, 40 years, they're pretty linear. However, in 2020, there's a big jump. Over the last few years, that has stayed at those levels. They haven't come back.
Yeah.
So
Frank,
the delta is you want to get those back to kind of what that linear level was pre-2019 to kind of eliminate $1 trillion or so that's excess. I don't know what your thoughts on that, or if it's just.
No, absolutely. So, Frank, did the Bidenites spend much more than they should have? Did they throw around more money than they should have in COVID? Yes, of course they did. But at that point in time, we weren't sure. I mean, you have people getting stimulus checks who didn't need them. We all know that. I remember a reporter called me up and said, Professor, we all got stimulus checks. My grandparents, and I got several. And I'm going, am I the only one on the planet who never got a stimulus? I would have liked a stimulus check, How come I don't get any checks? Anyway, and so, yeah, of course we spent more, but it was a dark time and there was a liquidity trap, if you remember. We were printing money. This was essentially just banking out money and throwing it out there. And the reason we didn't get a hyperinflation, anytime we would, is that money just sat there. Any other time, the deficit GDP ratio was around 14%. But there was no hyperinflation because that money didn't go into the bloodstream of the economy, and
Exactly.
Of course, you're right. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly.
One comment
you.
I want, thank you. One important comment I want to make, guys, I'm going to stop sharing. So one important comment I want to make about deregulation. Okay, so I said, of course I like deregulation. Who wouldn't? Listen carefully now, folks. I'm going to take you back to Adam Smith real quickly. You have all these guys, these supply-sider types. You see my Rutgers pen? That's very important. Thank you. Who would say, oh, Adam Smith said total deregulation. Adam Smith said the invisible hand. No. So you have Trumpists, Trump loyalists, and Leonard Musk going around saying, well, Adam Smith said deregulation, remove all regulation. He never said that. I was lucky. I had a great professor at Virginia Tech who was part of a team that won the Nobel Prize. So I was lucky, Jeffrey Brannon. And so what Adam Smith said, many of you remember this from class, he never said unfettered deregulation. He never said go around fracking wells in national parks or digging massive holes in the Arctic Wildlife Circle or whatever. No. What Adam Smith said was, you first have regulation that's designed to give you optimal outcomes. So you set the whole regulatory structure first. You design your incentive structure so that you and you and you will work and make stuff designed to achieve some society's goal. You set that reference frame first. You set your incentive structure first, and then you step back and allow the invisible hand to work. There was never unfettered deregulation. If you read Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith, he never said that. This is like a deep click comment. And you have all these guys, talking heads on TV going, well, Adam Smith said invisible hand. Only after establishing a very definite, finely tuned incentive structure. We're going to leave you alone and get you total freedom, but you will operate within these bounds. Adam Smith would never have said, cut down every tree in the forest, dig holes every 50 feet in every national park, harvest all the fish in every sea and in every coastline. That's not the deregulation that was advocated by Adam Smith. And I'll never forget, and some of you have heard the story, all of you in China, We have China and Singapore tomorrow. That's the Friday morning. Here I am. I got home once late at night, 10:30 from an evening class, and Jiang Zemin was being interviewed by Peter Jennings, I think, who was just antagonizing Jiang Zemin by saying, well, in this country, we have deregulation and we have an invisible hand. You might not know this, but Adam Smith said there's an invisible hand, and uncle, the governments here do not get involved, unlike China, where you're in everything. And I was having my cereal, After you come home, what do? You have cereal. So I'm sitting there, Simon, my cat, was with me. And I was like, oh no, Adam Smith did not say that. Lo and behold, Jiang Zemin goes in English. He switches into English and says, Adam Smith did not say that. Because to me, it was a deep click. I was in Jeffrey Brennan's class. They all got a Nobel Prize. I said, what? I remember the cereal spoon hung in midair. As Jiang Zemin said, no, Adam Smith said invisible hand only after you establish a very definite incentive structure and parameters. And I went, wow, that early team of Chinese leaders, and I'm a Sinophile, as is Lewis, I'm thinking, they knew their macro. Zhu Rongxi is they knew their macro. Sadly, Xi Jinping is a different story, but that early team, I was going, wow. And I thought I was privileged to have an amazing professor. And so here you go, oh, yeah, Adam Smith said no. And so for the Trumpists, I say, guys, go back to your Adam Smith, read a book called Wealth of Nations, which was a very painful book to read, by the way. There is no total deregulation. You're getting it wrong. So don't try and justify your indiscriminate, crazy madness by saying, oh, yeah, there is some theoretical precedent to this and this theoretical backing to this. There isn't. They've got that wrong. Okay, so that's that comment. Share diagrams again. Any questions, folks? Or anything? Okay. Share. Microsoft Whiteboard. Okay, so here we are. So we've talked about this. And so now I've mentioned to you that for this baby to do this number, there can't be drama. There can't be, at the weekly crisis, 2-3 crises a week, there can't be, because that will be, to repeat myself, a wedding where the caterer refuses to show up. You'll be stuck here. And tax revenues will not happen. And G minus T, the deficit will explode. Okay, so but what's the warning light? Here we go. Can anyone guess which kind of warning light will go off first for Presidents Musk and Trump to take notice? The deficit starts going out of control. Let me clear this board. It's easing up. Can anyone guess from what we've done in the past, which warning light will go off?
Long bonds.
Bonds.
Wow. Who is that?
Sesh.
Research is on fire. So basically, long bonds. Watch out for the long-term interest rate. So the Fisher effect. So I'm going to turn off the camera and just talk about this in plain English, and then we'll come back to this equation here. Okay, so what I'm going to preface, let me stop sharing. So here we are. So the first warning light, the reality is assumed. Now I could be wrong, and there could be another golden era as there was in the McKinley administration, and I could be completely wrong. I have been wrong once when I read the bonds wrong about the Ukraine war. So that's one time in my life. So I could be wrong again. So here we are. The long bonds will start warning us. How will that work? Here it's called the Fisher effect, and I'll give you the equation, but here is how it will work. It works. Oscar wants to borrow $1,000 from me for 5 years. I'm the lender. I'm lending Oscar money for 5 years. When he pays me back, I want to be better off by 5%. Right. Now I'm doing all my analysis and I see, looking forward into the future, 5 years from now, there's going to be 10% inflation. Which means when he pays me back 10 years from now, how long was it? 5 years, 10 years, Oscar?
It was 5.
Years?
It was 5.
Yeah. When he pays me back, thank you, Lou. When he pays me back 5 years from now, that money is going to be 10% worth 10% less because inflation was 10%. Add on top of that drama and discord and impeachments and all kinds of the Trump weekly drama. That's also adding stress. Let's leave that aside for now. So Oscar pays me back in 5 years. Inflation is 10%, so shoot, that money is going to be worth 10% less. So what do I do today to make sure that when he pays me back, I cancel that effect of the inflation, 10%, and I make sure I get 5% more. So I charge him 15%. With me, folks? So now, here is the takeaway: long-term mortgage rates, long-term bond rates. They are one of the few things on this planet in macro that are forward-looking. Everything else is backward-looking. The CPI inflation, last month's inflation. GDP growth, last year's. Unemployment, last month's. Wages, last month's. Consumer confidence, which is down today, by the way, last month's. Everything is in the rearview mirror except long bonds, which are forward-looking. And so long-term interest rates are looking into the future. And if I think inflation 5 years from now is going to go up because deficits are non-sustainable, because we'll be printing more money to fund them, then if inflation is going to be 5, 10, 15%, I'll charge Oscar more now to make up the difference. Are you with me, folks? So long-term rates are forward-looking, and they are trying to guess or capture inflation in the future. And so lenders today will adjust their lending rates to make sure that they're compensated for future inflation. And here is the best part: the Fed doesn't control long-term rates. The market does. In our language, they are endogenous. So if there is a warning when governments misbehave, when deficits start going out of control, long-term rates start flashing. Long-term rates start flashing. So watch the long bonds. If mortgage rates start rising, it's the long, there's an expression on Wall Street that says bonds know best. Bonds do know best. There are bond vigilantes out there who are obsessed with looking at what the long end of the bond is doing. And so it'll be great.
Just one quick question. Thanks for doing all this. One quick question about the long bonds, just going back to your example. So would you define a long bond anything greater than 5 years?
Yeah, who is speaking?
Sorry, Mike Haas.
Oh my God, Mike, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good. So yeah, 5 years would be good. 5 years typically. And so if you remember the yield curve, so the long end of the yield curve is going whoop, long-term rates are going up. And remember, folks, the bond market is endogenous. It's market-driven. It cannot be bullied. Presidents cannot fire it. Presidents cannot tax it. They can try and manage it like Operation Twist and fiddle with it. Doesn't work. It's got a mind of its own. It cannot be intimidated. It's an animal by itself. It's got a mind of its own, and bonds know best. And Matt, that famous story I like is that James Carville, that comedian. So James Carville, and you've heard this before many times, famously said that if God said, James, after you die, I'll send you back to planet Earth. You can be anything you like. James said, I would like to come back as the bond market. If I move just a little bit, everybody freaks out. And so it's that powerful. And I remember in grad school when I heard it thinking, there is humor in macro. There is humor in macro, And so bond market. So Mr. Trump, Elon Musk, beware the bond market. Reckoning will come from that if there is to be. Yes, the Fed controls only overnight rates, The Fed has nothing to do with the bond market. So So that's where we are in terms of the supply side and the Reagan story. So that's pillar number one. Well, I move to pillar two, the tariffs. Any questions? We have Hap there, Anil, who graduated from the program and is a professor here teaching strategy. So Hap.
Professor, one question I have that, as you said, the bond market is not actually can be controlled by the Fed or the government. It's its own way. It is kind of endogenous. So, but bond interest rate, right? So basically, when they issue a bond, government, that time they issue a bond. That time they put the rate. This is the rate interest rate you can get from the bond. That rate actually given by them only, right? When the government issues some bond to buy.
Yeah, Santhu, could you send me that as a text? I'm not following, but I just want to make an important comment here, folks. And I just saw another chat flash by, is that, so long-term rates going up, warning light. Keep in mind, folks, that will happen as long as we keep plodding along. And we have been doing well. The macro data prior to the election has been good. Aside from the deficit, in November, October, the envy of the world. We are still pretty much that. In terms of macro statistics, we are on fire. We were on fire. Yeah. The envy of the world. And you shake your head thinking, how did the Bidenites drop the ball? Not just the envy of the world by far in all the statistics, except that inflation thing, which they couldn't explain probably, so. Okay, so here is the deal. Now, if the bottom falls out, I can't remember who asked me that question. If the bottom falls out of the economy, confidence plunges, the economy, which is humming along from the Biden era to the present, goes down, long-term rates fall precipitously. So that's another scenario. So one warning light is the bond markets, the long-term rates will keep going up and will flash, the deficits are non-sustainable. But another scenario, and I haven't seen the future, is that economy tanks, and when that happens, mortgage rates will fall. So that's the other extreme case. If my former case is right, folks, all of you who have money lying around, park it in CDs. Don't try and be fancy. I know CDs are boring, but it's the safest thing on the planet. Just park it and park it long. So keep an eye on it. Be boring. It's not exciting, but it's the best. It'll be the best deal if we have Dr. Ira Cohn here who ran our China program for many years. So, ni hao ma. Okay. I'm going to share the screen and now talk about pillar two, the tariffs, and this infatuation with McKinley. So, before I share, McKinley, very much like President Trump, I've never seen him smile. I think his muscles, I've looked many photographs of McKinley, his muscles have been atrophied. I don't think he physically could smile. If you were to make him smile, it would actually hurt him. Go check it out. Google McKinley. Muscles are atrophied. No, it's only frowning. And I'm thinking Trump is essentially modeling himself after McKinley. But that's not important. Okay, tariffs.
Farrokh, just before you go to tariffs, I know you said America is the envy of the world, and in class you always says that the confidence in America is always there globally. So what is the effect of all of this on the global economy?
Yeah, so you know what, on that note, guys, I've been seeing some disturbing blogs, WhatsApps flying around lately that we are force feeding our bonds to the rest of the world. And this domineering effect of forcing the world to take our dollars and our treasury bills is not good. And we really should be punished and we should put an end to it. And the BRICS, God bless them, Brazil, Russia, India, and China are going to take over and be the global currency. And I'm going, Cheryl, what I said still holds in class. Nobody is putting a gun to anybody's head to have dollars as the common currency. You know, the example I like is my dad. God bless him, he's gone now, but I would take money home every time I went to see him. And you remember this from class. I would take bundles of dollars home and I would ask him, Dad, should I convert this to rupees? And he would go, No, 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 are you crazy? Leave it in dollars. Convert to rupees. What's wrong with you? And when they both passed away, there all the bundles were still in dollars. And you know, nobody was putting guns to anyone's head. It's endogenous. It's the safe haven currency. And you know, look, even on the day of the insurrection, where all this could have ended, if the insurrection on January 6th had taken one wrong turn, opened one wrong door, if Pence had shown up, things would have changed completely. This whole safe haven thing I keep bragging about and talking about would be over. You know, we came very close to the fire that day, by the way. But that safe haven thing still holds. You know, we have problems, but everyone else has more problems. So it's the safest haven. And nobody is forcing anyone to take the currency. It's endogenous. So all these conspiracy theories, they need to park them.
I quote you all the time when I say it's the nicest cave. I quote you all the time.
Hey, Jennifer Kirby. Yeah, thank you. So that's the class when 2005 that brought us our first rankings, by the way. One of the smallest classes and number 5 in strategy and number 6 in finance. Langdana remembers everything. Okay, let's look at the tariffs. So what's a tariff? Then we'll do the McKinley tariffs, and then we'll end with why not run a country like a company? And then we'll be done. So a tariff is a tax on imports. I'm going to talk about, on that note, guys, those of you who want a deep dive in tariffs with the nice diagrams and equations, on Wednesday, March 24th, Monday, March 24th, it's a makeup class for my Wednesday night class. I'm doing tariffs then. And I will send you all a link. You're welcome to come online. So Monday, March 24th, tariffs, it's 3 hours or 2.5 hours. So you get all the gory diagrams then. Also, UEMBA alums, Nacho from Madrid is doing an alumni event on March 9th. Just forgot to make these announcements, so please sign up. It's $30. He's doing pricing strategy in the world of AI and in the world of inflation. March 9th. You should have many emails from me on that. And regarding emails about a healthcare conference, you got like 5 of them. I'm sorry, the system was misbehaving last night. All right. So a tariff is a tax on imports. So let's say the Chinese are sending this pencil, Chinese pencil from Shanghai. And it costs, box of this costs $5. So a tariff basically is a tax on these imports to make it $7. First point is the Chinese don't pay the $7. Okay, the Chinese still get $5. So this is very important. Mom and pop America are paying the higher price. If you drive an SUV, which is imported from Japan, you and I, Subaru, have paid 25% tariff. So we are the schmoes. Mom and pop America are the schmoes who pay the higher price. The Chinese still get $5 for this big box. You and I are paying the $7. So that's point number 1. And no matter how many times you tell mom and pop this, America this, they don't get it. So now that the policymakers are trying to explain tariffs like it's a sales tax, guys, maybe they can understand that. So that's the first takeaway. So Chinese pencils cost now $7 for the big box. Well, so then don't buy Chinese pencils. That's the whole idea. Buy American pencils. This is a Musgrave pencil actually made in Tennessee. I'm not here to show you my pencil collection, but still. And so buy American pencils. What's wrong with that? Here's another takeaway, which many of you should remember. And those of you in my Wednesday night class, we will do this on March 24th. Please listen. American pencils will also cost $9 almost immediately. Imported Japanese SUVs are going to cost 25% more. Buy American then. They will cost 25% more. This is incontrovertible because immediately people will switch over to the domestic one. Not just switch over, but the futures of aluminum and steel, which are tariffed from China, will reflect the prices. So domestic prices will match the imported prices right away. There is no controversial, but it's a fact. Equivalency, yes, perfect, Mark. And so result number one, now inflation has gone up. Prices have gone up for the Musgraves from Shelbyville, Tennessee, and Zhonghua from Shanghai. They both are going to be $7. But here's another takeaway. What happens then? Typically, all these analyses stay at that stage, at that first stage. So when we slap tariffs on China, there'll be a retaliatory tariff, like there was in Smoot-Hawley in the Great Depression, like there was with McKinley. People don't understand that when McKinley, when he was not a president, pushed through the McKinley tariffs, and then he became president a few years later on, he disavowed them. And the McKinley tariffs were gone in 4 years. It was a disaster. So I don't know what the fascination is. But so anyway, now the foreign country will retaliate. So now they'll tariff our agriculture going there, and our jet engines, and our avionics. And so suddenly now our exports to them will be affected. So prices of those go up. And the problem is, back in the McKinley era, there was tin plate. Basically, he was trying to save tin plate used for cans and for drums for oil. So it was the tin plate industry that was really holding his attention. And it was an infant industry at that time. This is 1896, 1890 or something. And so put tariffs, protect that industry from foreign competition, and then remove the tariffs when the industry has matured. And Reagan, to his credit, understood that if you want to protect something like Harley-Davidson, he protected Harley for 5 years. And then each year he took down the tariff. And finally he said, in 5 years, if you don't get your act together, you sink, you're gone. And Harley managed to save itself. So there was like a limited tariff, very focused on Harley. There was a plan, not this broad brush thing, which was really lots of drama and then lots of negotiation. And so
Professor, one question.
Yeah.
Now that we have global supply chains for every product, when you look at the iPhone and it has 10,000 pieces, and some industries where Mexicali, the product crosses the border 4 or 5 times before a complete product is made, how do you think that's going to overall affect
Hannibal, you
the
beat
industry?
me by it by about 5 minutes. So what I was coming to is back in the day with the tin plate and the products, the actual items changing countries. Today, most of global trade, 70% of global trade, as I'm fond of saying, is not bananas coming from here and turbines going from here to there. Bananas coming from there to here, turbines going. No, 70% of global trade is married into supply chains. So, how are you going to tariff? As you mentioned, the iPhone. 35 countries' components are making this thing here. So if I do that component coming from China to make this phone, that's going to affect the price of my phone, which I'm assembling here or maybe assembling in Mexico. And so that whole tariff war thing is fine, but which product will you tariff? Because now it's mostly intra-industry trade. You see, it's countries married together, 300 countries making jet engines, 25 countries doing testing on a new antibiotic that's being made, clinical testing, for example. It's not all manufacturing, it's services too. And so it's very hard, this whole notion of a trade war and tariffing each other's, the actual implementation is, well, on what? Unless you do pork and soybeans going from here and steel coming from there, but otherwise it's very small range of goods that you can even tariff. So that's another issue. One issue is the retaliatory tariffs that nobody talks about. Another issue is, as Hannibal pointed out, it's intra-industry trade. It's supply chain. Things are baked into supply chains. So you can't even really think of a trade war for a large range of goods. But thirdly, there is transshipment. As Lewis and I are fond of saying, and it's a old Chinese expression that Ira and my Chinese members will all know, if you build a 50-foot high wall, somebody will invent a 51-foot ladder. And Chinese do know all about walls, of course. And so what happened when we put tariffs on China? They routed it through Vietnam. Today, they're routing it through Malaysia. Vietnam's economy boomed. They had to build a deep water port to handle all this excess. And so you see made in Vietnam, no, it's actually transshipment. You know, it's coming through, or it's coming through from China to Malaysia to Mexico and in through the back door. And so this is a game you can't win. You know, it's a 51-foot wall. And the McKinley tariffs were again revoked in 4 years. They were dismal failures. So this fixation, yeah.
This is Anthony McKenzie. So
oh my God.
Let's talk about a blast from the past.
So
I'm in Panama.
He was number 3 at. So Anthony McKenzie is wandering around the business school, and Dell is on campus, and he just pops in and does an interview, and they all go, "Who are you? You sound amazing." So he's number 3 at Dell. He hangs out with Michael Dell for many years. I should be your agent, Anthony.
I don't think I could afford you. But the point I was going to make was with the point that you're just elaborating on. I think we're seeing the immediate impact of that with regards to DeepSeek. What's happening with DeepSeek with AI, right? So they're with the tariffs on the chips, are not able to get access to the NVIDIA chips, and they've worked around it, and right, and so
wow.
there was always a solution, and if with the impact we're seeing with that in the AI space, which is now the hot technology topic, certainly of the day, and I see for the future.
Yeah, thank you so much, Anthony. Yeah, let's talk about AI. Let's talk about trade and embargoing semiconductor chips and artificial. Thank you for taking me there, because I wasn't sure when in this discussion. There's so much up there in my mind that thank you for that. So here we are trying to prevent China from getting too far ahead in AI. All right. Well, what's happened is it's not working, as Anthony pointed out. You know, there's something called large language models, LLMs, which apparently, and I'm not a guru and I don't claim to be one, but these large language models are apparently very important for generative AI. And here we essentially are not selling advanced semiconductors and microprocessors to China to make sure that they don't get too far ahead in AI. But what's happening is they're buying something called graphics processing units, GPUs, apparently, which are key components of this technology, these GPUs. Well, they're buying them on the black market. This is the 51-foot ladder. They're renting space on the cloud. They're buying it on the black market. And NVIDIA actually refused to cooperate. Last time I looked, NVIDIA is still selling them these GPUs. So
they're selling them to Singapore, and China is bringing it in from Singapore. So they worked around it. They worked around the.
Yeah. So they're getting them. So
actually, NVIDIA developed. This is Paul. Class of 2004. How are you, Farrokh?
Hey,
NVIDIA
Paul.
developed a chip specifically for the Chinese market that was in compliance with the export regulations, meaning it wasn't as quote unquote fancy as what was prevented to be shipped. Think of it as sort of a iPhone SE version of the chip, right? Kind of a lower end version of the chip. And apparently, and again, it's business in China is not quite as transparent as it might be in other places. But apparently the story is the folks at DeepSeek took these perfectly legal chips that they got from NVIDIA, and they engineered what I put in the chat is a 45-foot ladder to get over the 50-foot wall. So they took a whole different approach to their AI model building that could work with the far less powerful chips. And I won't get into the details of it here, but they developed what appears to be a competitive model using far less sophisticated technology and less money, obviously.
Thank you, Paul. So are you working in the area?
I am not, but I have an interest in it, and I read up on the developments in it pretty regularly.
So here we are. The embargo is not quite working. China is pulling ahead, apparently much more in military and in defense in AI than we are, apparently. And there's this professor called John Villasener, who I've been following from UCLA, and he's a technology guru.
Look, sorry for interrupting, but I think China's been way ahead of us for a while because all of us have been to China with you. It has the most cameras per capita, and they've been doing facial recognition and all that stuff. Like, there's no police anywhere. And I was pretty spooked by the fact I had to be fingerprinted and photographed at the airport on entry. So when there are things that we may think is ethical that we don't look at, that they've been ahead long before us. So I'm not
Hannibal,
surprised at all.
I'm trying to keep C bar, I bar high here. Work with me, man. Work with me. So I've been following this professor called John Villasener. He's UCLA guy, and he writes on technology strategy. And they asked him, what do we do? How do we prevent China? Now, remember, China, by the way, was a giant of technology before the era of colonialization. Remember that. China and India had 40%, 40, of global GDP before the Western powers came in and did the colonialization thing. So in the DNA, innovation is there. It's not like it's suddenly, oh my God, how did the Chinese? It is there. It's been there. And so they asked this John Villasener professor, like, what do we do? I mean, we embargo it, we have restrictions and 51-foot ladders or 45-foot ladders, and that was beautifully put. What do we do? And his response was, the best way to stay ahead of China is not to over-regulate at home. And I thought, wow, if you can design your deregulation and give us the tools and leave us alone, can we Americans pull this off again like we have done in the past? And I was thinking, this is essentially my mom. Basically, you got to be number 1 or 2 in class. You have the tools. Now I'm going to leave you alone. Now, you're not going to complain about the other guys being smarter. You can't complain about the other guys who are getting private tuitions or they have large study rooms. No, this is what you have, this little table in the corner, and you better nail it. But I'm giving you the tools to study, and here are the books, and you do it. And so deregulate, no focus on China. Here at home, we take our game up. It's as simple as that. And keep in mind, if you know your history, we get written off every time. America gets written off over and over and over again. We just keep bouncing back. Just when the whole planet had kind of shut down, when we lost computers, we came up with the internet. When we lost semiconductors to Taiwan, we invented microprocessors. Just when we think we've lost the ball, we come up with the next big thing. And so we have done it throughout history. It's a question of belief and faith. Give us the tools, give us proper deregulation, not do fracking every 50 feet and change Mount McKinley's name, change back to McKinley, that sort of nonsense. We can pull this off again. And like I said, there is no guarantee, but so I thought that was a wonderful and a deep click answer. Okay. So that's number 2, tariffs not going to work. And keep in mind, folks, this is an important thing. Of course, tariffs will push up prices. And the more we talk about it, more the expectation. So even if people will, Trump supporters tell me he's not going to actually do the tariffs. It's a bargaining ploy. You don't understand. This is a macro. Talking about tariffs, talking about future prices going up is enough to cause expectations of inflation to go up. You see, and inflation is driven by expectations of inflation. This is macro. And long-term interest rates will capture those expectations of future inflation. Those long bonds will start again going, moop, moop, moop. So this isn't a digital circuit. You're messing with expectations. And the more drama you do out there, the more weekly crazy announcements you make, that's adding to this layer of angst that's causing long-term interest rates to go up. So yeah, the bluffing and all, it's not helping. It's causing larger even if the tariffs don't happen, the expectations are still baked in, and that's not helping us. Okay, any questions so far? Okay, the third leg is run the country like a business. And it seems to make a lot of logical sense. You know, why not? Why not? And I think for this current class, there was an article by Robert Reich, who was in the Clinton administration, and I think I passed it out in class. But it's not just an extension of the business world, it's just different. It's not possible. It's apples and oranges. So there are three reasons. So Reich lists three reasons why you can't run a country like a company. The first one is, and we have finance professors here, I'm sure, and many of you in finance. In finance, what's the objective function? There is one objective function, and that is?
Maximize profit?
Yeah, maximize shareholder wealth, right? And you know, to my credit, when I was doing my MBA at Virginia Tech, right from engineering school, I remember hearing that and going, that's it? Maximize shareholder wealth? To my credit. I didn't realize I was way ahead of my time for whatever reason. I said, but that's your maximizing an objective function. What's the constraint? I mean, subject to what? And everyone just looked at me. I mean, you want to maximize shareholder wealth? You can cut down every tree in the forest. That would do it. You can dig holes everywhere and look for oil. That'll do it. You can, you know, have consumers paying all kinds of horrible prices. That might actually help you. I don't know, destroy your competition. What about foreign countries? What's the constraint? That seems such a narrow and such a mercenary sort of thing. And I remember there was no argument. People looked at me in complete incomprehension. But what about the environment? Shouldn't that be important? This is way back when. And they looked at me as if I was speaking in medieval Aramaic or something. So in the business world, there is one objective function, maximize shareholder wealth. When you're running a country, mercifully, there are others. There's the environment. There's the welfare of those who are not wealthy and who are impoverished or who are ill or who are elderly. There are foreign countries. There are whole constituencies who don't have representation. They're animals, you know? And so it's a multifaceted objective function. You know, so Robert Reich famously says, you know, when he got into government in the Clinton administration, he was speaking to this lady who was his chief of command and said, it's governance. The key is good governance, he tells her. And she famously turned to him and said, governance to what end? What's your goal? That's when you realize that in government, there are multiple goals, not maximize shareholder wealth, maximize, like we were parroted to say. So that's one. Number two, in business world, as you all know, you have total command. You are the boss. You make the decision, everybody follows suit, you know, and everybody prostrates. You get total obedience. Yeah. Leonard Musk is in the building. Oh my God. Oh, I saw him on the 11th floor. He's in the conference room. Oh my God. Whatever he says happens. Jamie Dimon, oh my God, Jamie Dimon's passed decree. Everybody has to follow it. Oh my God. Not so in the business world, in the real world, in running a country. You have cabinet ministers, you have the other party, you got foreign governments, you got voters, constituents. So you don't have the same, much that Trump and Leonard Musk would like to think that. And yeah, they don't have the chain. The chain of command is not from one person straight down. There's a compromise. And Reich points out, third one is scrutiny from the media, scrutiny from the other party. And guess what, guys? That one is weak. The example Reich gives is that, if you're running a company, you're not scrutinized. Whatever you say, you're not evaluated constantly. But when you're running a country, you're constantly evaluated and judged by the media and the other party that's firing salvos at you. Well, the other party maybe, but the media, sadly, guys, has been emasculated. There's nothing there. There is no Washington Post, Louis, anymore. They're emasculated. It's kind of sad. Leonard Musk and Trump, they throw a couple of red shiny balls every week and all of them chase them every week. And then they have talking heads discussing the last most preposterous announcement, all designed to distract, obviously, while the real agenda is being carried out. And it's sad. So that point 3 is gone. This constant evaluation and examination and scrutiny, it's over. And most people are just looking at their phones to whichever platform they like, and they're getting their news. So the first two may be still holding, but the scrutiny aspect is largely gone in this country, sadly. I might be wrong, but that's my opinion. So not really easy. Easier than it has been, by the way, to run a country like a company. But here is my take. So I'm adding the fourth one. Why you can't run a country like you're running a company. And this is a little tongue in mouth, indulge me here. But when you're running a company, it's a room full of dogs. So you say, all right, everyone, I've got a big bus downstairs. Who wants to go for a ride? And everybody goes, right. And all the dogs jump on the bus, tails wagging, tongues flopping about, and they're all on board. Running a country is like a giant auditorium filled with cats. And so when you say, all right, I've got a bus downstairs, who wants to jump on board? Well, 5 kittens may jump on board wearing the little red caps maybe. But the rest will be completely ignored. Excuse me, did anyone hear what I'm saying? There's a bus. Who wants to come on board? Some of them are asleep. Some of them are acting like they're asleep. Some of the cats are staring into space, doing nothing, with the tails just twitching. Some of the cats are getting ready to jump on the other cats and terrorize. No one's paying attention. Running a country is an auditorium of cats, Mr. Trump and Mr. Leonard Musk. That's the big problem. And so, you know what? There'll be 2 engine warning lights. So the engine warning lights for the Trump administration, there'll be 2. The first one will be the long bonds, if the deficits go out of control. And I suspect they will. And by the way, for those of you who have money lying around, that's good. CDs will earn you money. But the first engine warning light, long bonds, and the second engine warning light will come from the cats. Long live the cats. There you go, folks. That's my talk. And I hope you enjoyed it. And now I'll take some questions from all of you, any of you. I know that tons. Oscar, hopefully you captured all the questions, please.
Great
Oscar,
job. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions I can answer?
Yes, I have a couple questions. Let me look at it.
Yeah. You can.
How to lower 10-year T-bill?
How to lower? No, man. Don't touch it. You can't do anything to it. So here we go. Here we are. So basically the Fisher effect is long-term interest rates is equal to the real interest rate plus pi. These are expectations of inflation. And so if you look at the yield curve, those of you remember this is time to maturity. So this is maturity. So this is a 30-day government. Uncle Sam's borrowing for 30 days. This is interest rates. 1 year, 10 years, and 30 years. And so this is what a normal yield curve looks like. As Uncle Sam borrows more, there's more uncertainty and rates are higher. It's the normal interest rate, normal yield curve. And if there's risk happening, if the bonds are seeing inflation coming, the deficit's not sustainable, Uncle Sam's going to have to print money, the tax revenues are not happening, we have a wedding and the caterer did not show up, that long end starts rising. And it's endogenous, can't do a darn thing about it. They have tried. There was the Kennedy administration did Operation Twist. They tried to artificially pull this long end down. It was called Operation Twist because when they tried this, it was the Chubby Checker song, Twist. Most of you don't know that. That's why it was called Twisting It Down. It didn't work. This was endogenous. You don't mess with something that's endogenous. Any other?
Professor Langdana, this is Mithul.
Hey, Mithul.
Hi. So one more thing I was thinking about was Trump is trying to deport a lot of these immigrants. I think that's probably going to contribute to inflation as well, with food prices going up and other jobs.
You know what? Have you seen Gone with the Wind, the movie, Mithul?
Yes.
You have? So in the first scene, and if you're shaking that, oh no, Farrokh, not that Gone with the Wind story again. How many times? So the first scene in the movie, the lady is telling Scarlett, what men say and what men do are two totally different things. So how many have been deported? Let's see how many. There's a big C-130 that takes off, which can carry 2,500 people or whatever. They have 80 people in there. Let me first see how many deportations happen, So we are right now, this is a world of optics. Everybody's playing for optics. Trump is playing for optics, and some of your CEOs are playing for optics. It's scary. You have Apple making announcements. Oh, well, we are going to have 20,000 new jobs in the next 2 years doing stuff here. That was already planned 3 years ago. Then you have some pharmaceutical, we'll have 2,000 jobs, trying to get in the good books of Mr. Trump. So everybody is playing for optics. It's the end of the day visual that everybody is trying to shoot for.
Professor?
That's the game.
Professor, this is Debolina.
Hi, Debolina.
Hi, Professor. So, yeah, I was just thinking about one thing. So we see all these tech CEOs rallying around, rallying behind Trump, supporting him. Why do you think they are doing it, and what could be their end game in this whole scenario? And do you think that has any effect on how the economy?
So, you know what? I was told my trade class to remind me of the story, but let me just tell you now, it's because of a talking horse. So my dad told me the story. That's exactly what this is. So back in the old country, Persia, Iran, where my ancestors came from, there was this crazy king who essentially had sentenced this guy to death because he dared to look directly at the king. So mad guy, a tyrant. And so he was going to sentence this guy to death. So this guy says, wait, don't kill me yet. Give me 3 years. And in 3 years, I will teach your horse how to talk. And then you can have conversations with your horse. You can tell your horse, let's go to the armory. And you can order him. And if I fail in 3 years, then not only do you kill me, but you take all my property, enslave my whole family. How is that for a deal? And the king said, sure. And so what's the point of that story? The point of that story is you're buying time. In 3 years, anything might happen. This crazy guy may be gone. He may be usurped. He may be overthrown. So you are buying time. You are just playing the game. You are essentially living for another day. I'm going to have 2,000 jobs next month in my pharma company. You know, I'm bringing stuff back from, wow, on the Wall Street Journal's cover page. Trump's going to leave you alone for 6 months. You are done. Mission accomplished. That's the game. That's the game. They are all pandering. They're catering to a guy who just wants praise. And that's the game. You know, they are promising a talking horse.
Professor Langdana, I have one more question. Now, Trump is talking about a lot of drilling oil. So, I mean, if US is, I think, among the biggest oil, they have one of the biggest oil reserves in the world. Is that going to help in maybe reducing the inflation in some way?
So, you know what? Oil prices are already low. I don't know which oil prices, what oil issue there is. There is no oil price issue right now. But if you want to talk international trade, comparative advantage, yeah, we should be exporting oil. We have a comparative advantage in oil and gas. We should be exporting it. However, the boundaries have to be established. How safe is fracking? Is it really safe? Remember, we had an EMBA in the program who was the number 2 or 3 authority on water in the world. And I remember him telling me, yeah, Farrokh, we've improved a lot in fracking, but no, it's nowhere close to where it should be in terms of groundwater issues and so on. So have the right boundaries that we discussed earlier. If that's possible, yeah, oil should be exported, but there is no oil price issue. See, America seems to be fascinated by 2 prices. Prices of eggs, for whatever bizarre reason, and prices of gasoline. Gasoline I can understand, but eggs, you know, if I was in the White House, I would just forget subsidizing foreign countries. I would just subsidize eggs. If you're a middle low income person, take $75 a month, go buy eggs. Be happy. And America would be happy. That's me. That's a cheap way, but that's me. Hi, Lawrence.
Hi, Professor Langdana. I have a question.
Yeah, but I just saw that thing from Lawrence, and yeah, that's where we have no control. You know, so I mentioned the cats, which is moment of America. Trump's warning light would come from in long bonds, but so there are checks and bounds on him there. But global policy, Lawrence, there is no control, man. He's running amok.
Hi, Professor.
Hey, Michael. Yeah. So
I have a question about the Doge dividend checks that they've been talking about. Is that an attempt potentially to increase CBAR, or what do you think is the reason and potential impact of the Doge dividend checks?
You know, Mike, I'll be honest with you. I've reached a point in my life where I can't even keep track of all these crazy announcements, because in 2 days they are gone, and there is something else. And so, you know, there was a point when reporters would say, well, what do you think of this? I'm going, you know, why even bother? You know, is this got any lasting? Is this real? You can't govern a country by presidential decree, you know, whatever the executive pronouncements he's been making. So I have no idea. It's not even on my radar screen. It's like another shiny ball that they've thrown, and it's distracting you and me from whatever the real agenda is. I'm sorry.
So,
I remember
Farrokh, I have a question when you're ready.
Yeah, so remember when Hillary, I remember going back when Hillary's healthcare thing was happening. And I went through the same thing. I would diligently and seriously follow every little tweak in Hillary's big healthcare plan. And finally I realized, what am I doing? It changes every day. I'm just going berserk and losing my mind for nothing. So, yeah, what was the question?
The question is, if we destroy our goodwill overseas, for example, we help to facilitate the dismantling of NATO, do you feel that our reserve currency status becomes more at risk?
This is such a sad thing, Jennifer, but who else is there? Japan is slowly waking up, and by the way, the EMBA program goes to Japan for the first year this June. But China is not doing good. The housing market's taking, Europe is broken, Europe's in pieces. So sadly, but interestingly, the safe cave is relatively safe for a while. But more terrifying than that was a comment made 2 or 3 days ago by President Trump when he said, well, maybe we shouldn't pay the Chinese their interest on government bonds that they borrowed from, that they basically the money they lent to us by buying our bonds. And to me, that, as I mentioned in class last night, was one of the most terrifying things I have heard, because that right there is like a laser-guided missile aimed right at the safe haven, at the most vulnerable part of our safe haven. When you say things like, well, we won't pay the Chinese what we owe them on treasuries. Are you kidding me? We go. If that safe haven, that's the more damage to that than even NATO. It's like when Hillary said, oh, well, Chinese are buying too many of our bonds. Everybody jumped on her and said, don't say things like that. We should say, thank you, China, for lending to Uncle Sam. And so that comment about the Chinese terrified me. That freaked me out, because where is this whose team are you on that you're making comments like that about the treasuries? Okay.
Professor, I have a question. Loknath here.
Hi, Loknath.
Nowadays, natural resources and critical minerals seem to be more and more featuring in geopolitical discussions. Do you think this is likely to continue?
Yeah, and you know what? The whole thing with EVs, and I'm on thin ice here, I know that, is that there's zero emission, but there is not zero pollution. So while we were chasing Trump around in Trump 1.0, China cornered the whole lithium market on lithium processing and let them do it. It's extremely polluting. But, there is sodium, there is magnesium, there are other elements that are not rare metals. China has cornered the market on rare metals. And so maybe there are optional batteries from there. Maybe a hybrid is the way to go. But forcing mom and pop America to buy EVs a la Biden by subsidizing EV buyers from taxpayers' money is a disaster. That's not the way markets work and should work. Any market, here's the loose rule of thumb, any market that survives by being subsidized should not be there. Maybe a temporary subsidy is fine, but any market that can only exist with huge infusion of subsidies is not a market. Therefore, that means the smart money endogenously does not say it should exist. And so there are other minerals there. Maybe EVs is not the way to go. Maybe it's a hybrid. Maybe it's a more efficient gasoline engine. Let the market decide. Let the smart money decide. That's the beauty of it all.
Professor
Okay.
Langdana, one more question from this Mithul again. So
let's do a couple of 3 more and then we'll call it a day. Okay, folks? Yeah. And then I'll email you guys all the answers. Yeah, Mithul, go ahead.
So if the interest rates through long bonds go up, I mean, do you see the housing markets crashing in the next 2, 3, 4 years?
So you're on the housing market, Mithul. Yeah, you're on the housing market. So rent for a while, man. Just rent for a while. Look, I've been saying this lately in class, and I wish somebody like me had talked to me when I was younger. And that is, there will be people who tell you, you gotta buy now before the train starts moving, before the ship sails, you gotta jump on board. And, coming out of grad school, I listen to them. There will always be another train. I wish somebody like me had talked to me when I was young. There'll always be another ship. So if someone tells you, you gotta buy now, find a house, man, rates are gonna go up, let darn things go up. Just rent for a while. Park your money in a CD and be happy. Don't lie awake at night. Then I'm guessing you're significantly younger than me. There's always another train. So that's my advice, because I can sense where you're coming from, and that's my advice. Don't get freaked out. I remember, man, like you heard my story. I almost got sucked into the housing market right in the middle of the bubble. out west, Washington Township, monster house with 2 staircases and green granite. And, Professor, once this granite was mined in Brazil, there was no more green granite in the planet. And I went, and my wife's getting all emotional, and I went in a huge atrium and I ran out. Thank God I escaped the housing bubble because it was so close, but there was so much pressure. Don't fall for it. It's always another trade. Okay, let's take a couple more and then we'll call it a day.
Hey, Professor, it's Mike Haas again. I have a question about an article that we were discussing a little bit in the chat. It was in Saturday's edition of the Wall Street Journal, I believe, but it refers to, it's not necessarily macro, but it's definitely related. And I know you being a history buff may like this one. So it discusses around the Ferguson law and how if interest payments on your debt become greater than a great power's defense spending, history says it typically leads to the fall of that great power. And I wanted to know if you had any take on that, if you were familiar with this at all, and just your general thoughts, because there are some exceptions, some outs, but wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
So the great power presumably is the United States?
Yes, in the article.
Oh man, so listen, man. No, I haven't heard of Ferguson or his law. And send me the article, Mike. You have my email. But look, you know what? I mean, Revolutionary War, they wrote us off till Washington crosses the Delaware on Christmas night. And then everything changed. Civil War, we thought it's over. The Brits were already siding with the Confederacy. Then Antietam happens, thank God. And then we swing around. 9/11 happens, and oh my God, okay, we're gone. It's over. Stagflation, all right, we're gone. Great power, American empire is over. And I'm so tired of hearing the American empire is over. And, annoyingly for the rest of the world, we keep showing up again. We keep bouncing back. So, the BRICS are coming. Are you kidding? Russia? I mean, that economy is smaller than Iceland's. China's housing market's imploding. When you're thinking, if you think a country's really got it, think about your kids. Where are you sending your kids to go to school? Are you sending your kids to go to school to Moscow, to China? Where are the Chinese sending their kids? To Singapore and the US, if they can. Where are the Russians who are leaving they're coming to the United States? So that's where the smart money and the smart humans are going. And so we bounce back. We've been written off 25 times in history. And we are being written off now, especially by the Europeans. And all these things that keep popping up on my phone. And, annoyingly, we bounce back. Now, right now, we have a leader that is not helping globally, obviously. But, most countries are very resilient, and most countries outlast bad leaders, Mike. Most countries, as Churchill famously said, America tries everything, but eventually it gets it right in the end. And I'm hoping that still holds true.
Thank you.
And Ferguson, who is this Ferguson guy? Send me the thing.
I'll send it to you. I'll definitely send it to you.
Okay, guys. So thank you very much. And may your C bar and I bar always be high.